We talked about last week where conflict comes from. Where does it come from?
We don't get what we want.
We don't get what we want. We have desires that go unfulfilled. We learned that from James. And we learned basically that when we have a conflict, there's something that we want, and we often, through our communication, really fight to get what we want. We argue and we work to manipulate to get what we want. Some of us get quiet and turn on the silent treatment so that the other will know we're angry and we're upset and we're dissatisfied with what's happening, and others start yelling and screaming. That's my family. That's from my home life. That's the way we operated. You may operate differently. So you might be a ventilator like me, or an insulator like others. But there are two not so good ways to respond, especially in the face of conflict. And where there is a marriage, there is conflict. And it will happen. Not every day, not all the time, but you've got to learn within marriage to be a good conflict resolver. And in one of those ways, one of those things as far as conflict is concerned, not only do we have to have a spirit of forgiveness, and not only do we have to have a spirit of grace, mercy, a spirit of humble servanthood, those are all foundational in how we are, but we've got to learn how to communicate in positive ways that are actually going to bring about change and bring about resolution, rather than communicating in ways that actually escalate problems. There's a way to communicate and escalate problems, and we've got to make sure that we communicate in ways that dissolve problems rather than escalate them. Because when you escalate the problem, you really don't fix it, do you? You don't come to a place of peace. And so we're going to be in Proverbs 18 for a little bit. There's a lot the scriptures say in Proverbs in particular about how to use your tongue. If you want a good study, let's say you're bored, you're stagnant in your own personal life, go through the Proverbs and just think of different topics. For instance, I gave a homework assignment to someone to read through Proverbs and find every verse pertaining to anger. And anything dealing with anger. And you'll find, and just write them down. He came up with 6 pages worth of, writing them down, yeah.
If you just try and organize Proverbs into topics like
Yes.
that, you gave an example of one, but it's amazing.
Well, do that with the tongue, or with the way you communicate, the way you talk. It's a really good study. In preparation for that, I did a little bit of that. So I invite you to do that. But before we get to actual practical principles of communication, I just want to deal with one more aspect of the heart. And I want to show you a little bit why you get mad, in particular, when you have a disagreement. In fact, this is in marriage, you're going to have a disagreement. That means one person thinks one way and another person thinks another way, and you disagree. Now, why is it one of the guttural reactions is that we get mad and frustrated and we want to isolate ourselves from people who disagree with us? Well, think that through just for a minute. What is someone saying when they say, I don't agree? They're saying to you, the way you think is improper. Now, that's a problem, because the way I think, I believe, is correct, and you're telling me the way I believe is wrong. And there's something that goes off in the human spirit when we feel that way. So usually what we'll do, so that we don't feel that way, we try to convince the other person that they're the wrong one. And when two people who are consumed with being right and not coming to the grips with the possibility that maybe you could be wrong, you simply fight for the position. I find that in politics. You see it. People are either Democrats or Republican, and they don't even think through the issues. They don't think, well, we've just been Democrats, and so we vote Democratic, and if you don't vote Democratic, you're evil. And this year you see it even more exponentially. If you're a Trump supporter, oh my. Or if you're a Hillary supporter, oh my. And so it's very, very disheartening. We need to be people who think and will willingly analyze the position where you are. Is it right or not? One of the gracious things that God has allowed me to do theologically, I'm not very good at this in other practical ways, I'm working on it, is to always put what I believe to be true right here on a shelf and say, this is where I am right now. But I'm not just gonna die on this hill, because that might be wrong. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever in your life found out that something you believed to be true was not so true, and you had to change the way you think? Think about something. Has that ever happened to you? Now, when you believed it to be true, did you think it was wrong? Now, that's a silly question, but I want you to hear that. When whatever you believe to be true right now, you don't believe it's wrong. So when you believed something to be true and you later found out it was wrong, you have to look back at how you felt when you thought it was true. In other words, there are still stuff that you believe to be true right now that you've got to know you're just wrong on. You don't know what it is yet because you believe everything you believe to be true right now. But you've got to know that you don't have it all right. You've got to know that. So that means you need to be the kind of person that can say, I may not be right here. So let me put what I think and believe to the test. Why is that scary? That's a scary proposition for a lot of people. Why is that scary? Because depending upon how long you have believed it, it may have implications for an entire life of thinking. That's hard to come to grips with. And that's why, often I've had problems in churches. I'll come into a church that's been a certain way, a certain time, and I start preaching, and it's the kind of preaching that I bring is foreign to the people hearing it. And there's three groups of people, but usually there's one group is like, whoa, it's right there, I never saw it, that's amazing. And all of a sudden, 30 years of theology wiped away, corrected, or fixed in some way, shape, or form. And that was, Steve shared that with me. He said that. He says, I don't know where I was for 30 years, but I woke up when you came along. And he was thankful for that. Andrew shared a little something similar to that, and I'm thankful for that. And so those are people that woke up and saw the truth. They analyzed what they were believing, put it to the test, and what was true they held on to, and what was not they set it aside. Well, God's helped me to do that in my own personal life with what I've thought. If I were to preach some of the sermons I preached back in my younger days, I'd be ashamed to preach them. I would. Though at that time I wasn't ashamed at all. I proclaimed it loudly, and not proudly, but of course I'm proud. What I'm getting at here is really at the heart of fighting and arguing is pride. An unwillingness to identify the fact that I might be wrong. Say this with me. I might be wrong. Say those words.
I might be wrong.
Now here's some more powerful words than that. I am wrong. Say that.
I am wrong.
Those are powerful reconciliating words if you'll learn how to say them at the appropriate time. I'm wrong. I can't tell you how many arguments that'll squelch if a person is humble enough to identify and analyze when they are really wrong and admit it. Sometimes you'll know you're wrong, but you keep fighting anyway because you have this inward compulsion to be right. And I would say that really is at the heart of many of our arguments and fights. It's not so much the means of communication, but rather it's what the communication is showing to you about your heart. Jesus told us, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So in other words, whatever's coming out of your mouth, and the way it's coming out really is a reflection of what? Of what's going on in the heart. So that's why really, if I just preach a message on communication, here are 10 principles of communication. It'll never change you. You'll never do them. Why? Because until the heart is changed. And so really, I'm spending this first bit of time dealing with the heart and humility, learning how to take what you believe and say, okay, I'm not sure if this is right or not, or I believe it to be right, but let's put it to the test. That should not be scary, but it is. But it should be. I need to do that because do you want truth or not? Do you want to operate in the realm of truth, or do you just want to believe you're operating in the realm of truth? Sometimes I stop watching the news because I just don't want to know the truth. I just don't want to know. This ignorance is bliss. And I don't want to debate you or argue with you or even engage in you in a conversation that might challenge my thinking. Why? Because at the end of it, I might be wrong. So I'd rather not even argue about it. So so I can stay right. That's very human. We do this. And that's why people say, I don't want to debate. I don't want to debate. Because they recognize that probably they'll lose. And if they lose, then they have to come to grips with the fact that they may be wrong. We have to be the kind of people on the front end that can say I was wrong. That can identify when they're wrong and then walk in that wrongness as far as own it and then turn from it. That's hard, isn't it? So, reactions to that first bit of teaching there. What do you think? What hits you, what smacks you is true? What can you add to it that's helpful to that conversation? Did I nail any of you? Where did I learn it, y'all? I mean, all that I just shared with you, I learned it from my own experience, okay? It's the way, I just recognize the way I live my life out, and I've just been looking at it a little bit.
But if you think about it, that's why you should examine. It's because if you really want to be right, then...
Let's talk about this.
This is a line from the King of Island, be absolutely sure that what you know is so. That's what you do. You examine it to make sure you're right. You know? I mean, there's no quote in others that in life is not worth living. You just go around thinking you're right all the time and don't examine things. It's not worth living.
So we need to have the heart, first of all, in our arguments, to really, really do some introspecting and ask the question, are we really right here? Now, what if at the end of the day you are right? How then do you go about doing it?
That's why the phrase nanny, nanny, boo-boo
Frank Caliendo does an impression of is it Al Pacino? Nanny, nanny, boo boo, hoo-ah. And that's preserved for posterity for anybody that wants to listen. Title it Al Pacino impersonation.
One of these days I'm going to go back and make just like an outtakes video. Pull out all like...
You know how much work that would take? Oh, that's worth a lot of hours. Okay. I brought you to Proverbs chapter 18 because there's several morsels of goodness in this particular passage. But what we want to begin with, I'm going to give you 10 or 11. I may come up with more along the way, but anyway, right now I've got 10 principles of communication that are practical and biblical as well. And what we want to do is just see what the Bible says about communication. We're going to be kind of all over the place, but we'll be postured here in Proverbs 18 for a little bit. The first principle I just want to begin focusing on is that in your communication, in your reconciliating or dealing with a conflict, your aim needs to be reconciliation and peace. And we'll get to that more specifically in just a bit. Your aim needs to be reconciliation and peace. And in order to do that, then, we need to be, number one, listeners for understanding. We need to listen for understanding. Okay? In other words, sometimes we listen long enough so we know how to debate, and we jump in and we argue. We don't take time to actually understand the person we're talking with. Look at Proverbs chapter 18, verse 2. A fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing his opinion. What a powerful statement that is. A fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing his opinion. And oftentimes in arguments, all we really care about is my opinion here. I'm right. I know I'm right. I'm not even going to consider that I'm wrong. You need to listen to me. And so we'll forcefully move through a conversation. We'll do whatever we do naturally to make sure that we don't listen to the other person, but that they listen to us. But we need to be the kind of people who take the time to listen for understanding. Colossians 4 gives a little bit more, so that you know how to answer every man. Colossians 4 teaches, I think it's in verse 3 or 4, I can't remember, but it basically says, let your conversation, let your speech be always with grace, seasoned with salt, so that you know how to answer every man. That brings us to number 2. Don't focus always on being right or wrong. Listen to what a person is saying, even if you think it's wrong. That's important. The Bible says in Proverbs, a fool answers a matter before he hears it. A fool answers a matter before he hears it. Actually, the scriptures actually say, to him that answers a matter before he hears it, to him it is folly and shame. It's shameful. It's folly to answer something before you hear it. So the scriptures are teaching us that we need to be, what James says, quick to hear and slow to speak. Often in communication, basically, we just don't take the time to understand the other person's point of view. When you understand another person's point of view, you're going to be more, even if they're still wrong in expressing what they're saying, or you believe them to be wrong, you're going to be more adequately prepared to correct what they're saying. Yes?
That's Proverbs 18:13.
I think I had that marked here. Read it for us. Proverbs 18:13.
If one gives answer before
Yes.
his ears, it is his folly and shame.
Yes, there it is. I knew it was on here. It's one I remembered from years ago. But it's a great text. If you answer a matter before he hears. What does that look like in an argument at home? For me, I'm one of those guys. I cut my wife off. I listen long enough. I know what she's going to say. I fill in the rest of the dots, and I start answering the argument. Because I'm a debater, man. I'm a debater. You don't want to debate me. Neither does my wife. I don't want to be that kind of a person, but that's who I am naturally if I don't allow the Spirit to change the way I operate. And often that scripture comes to my mind, folly and shame to answer a matter. And my wife has come up with a good response to it. I'll start in on something she's beginning to say, and she'll say, "What was I going to say?" Finish my comment. In other words, she's cueing me in on that I need to listen a little longer. When you think you've listened enough, you probably need to listen twice as much. Be a good listener. My dad used to say this. This is the proverb my dad gave me. This is via my father. He says, "Why do you think you have one mouth and 2 ears? So you can listen twice as much as you speak." And I thought that was pretty good. Whether true or not, or why God gave you 2 ears, probably not the case. But certainly I like the principle application. Listen twice as long as you speak. So the first point is we need to be listeners for understanding. We need to make sure that we understand the person's perspective. That means we need to listen long enough. Don't answer that before you understand it. That's point number 2. Don't answer before you. That was point number 3. Don't answer before you hear it. Point number 2 was don't just focus in your argumentation on being right or wrong. Listen to what they're saying, even if you think they are wrong. Now, let me take a little bit and explain it. I often spend time explaining this in counseling. Often I get husband and wife, they come in for marital counseling, and this is the way it goes down. So I'll basically say, who would like to begin? Sometimes, and then usually it's the wife. Usually, because they're generally more patient than men, and if they're coming to counseling, they've reached their limit, which means it's gone way too long. And especially when the wife's the one who's calling me for the counseling. And what happens is she'll start complaining about the behavior of another person. And you know what the husband will usually do? He'll defend himself. He's like, well, I mean, she's only giving you one side of the story. Well, she says that, and I did that, but this is why. And all of a sudden, they're arguing and fighting. She's mad because he's done something or not done something. And he's just and right because it was a response, blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden, they're just fighting on being right. And they make no progress that way. What I have to spend time doing is teach them 1 Peter chapter 3, I think it's verse 7, that says, "Husbands, dwell with your wife and understanding. Whether, and I'll say this all the time in counseling. Listen, man. She might not be right, but listen to what she's saying, because that's where she is in her mind. When has anybody ever changed your mind by saying you're wrong? Think about it. By yelling and screaming and saying you're wrong and fighting you're wrong, when has that ever changed your mind? Never. How do people change? How do you get a changed mind? Present arguments that counter the way I think. Present rational, kindly worded statements that make me think about what I believe to be true. Those are the times in which my mind has been changed. I see your point. That makes a lot of sense. When do you come to that kind of conclusion? When you have heard and processed information that challenges the way I am presently thinking. But if all I do is argue and fight and respond in an argumentative way to something I believe to be wrong, I'll never change a person's mind. And so don't focus on being right, and don't focus on the other person being wrong. Listen to what they're saying, even if you believe everything they're saying is wrong. Because what they are saying is revealing where they are. Now, why is that important? Because whether they're right or wrong, where they are is important to be known, because where they are tells you how, at least will help you know where they need to go and how to get there. So don't just focus on being right in a conversation, but rather be willing to listen to things that you think are completely wrong so that you can understand where they are. Listen, have you ever heard the phrase, perception is reality? Perception is reality. When I'm saying something, and you're showing me that you have a certain perception of me, and I know that perception is wrong, how am I going to change the perception? Because that's what you think to be true about me. You see what I'm saying? In other words, regardless of whether it's true, your perception makes it true for you, whether it is true or not. If I say, what color is this? It doesn't matter what the answer is. It matters what you believe it to be. Now, what you believe it to be may or may not be a representation of what this color actually is. But that is what it is, regardless of what I think about it. So when I'm listening to someone who's I believe to be wrong, it doesn't matter whether I think they're wrong or not. They believe themselves to be right. You've got it. It's really, really important to understand this. Otherwise, all you're going to do is engage in the kind of communication that doesn't bring peace in the home. Because if all you ever do is argue and fight and want to be right, then you'll never bring peace to a conflict. In other words, I'm showing you a principle here that you need to employ so that we can bring peace to a conflict and reconciliation rather than elongate an argument and a fight. So listen long. Don't answer it before you hear it. And don't focus on being right or wrong. Listen to what's being said, even if you think it's wrong. How are we doing so far? I'm moving right through these. Number 4. You want to bring peace to an argumentation. Proverbs 15. Go back a couple of pages. Verse 1. A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word, grievous words, stir up anger. How many times when someone's been angry at you, do you react with anger? We tend to be mirrors in communication generally. When someone comes at you, we tend to be reactionary and give them back what they gave to us. That's a normal human response. But when you give back what they gave, what does it normally do?
They give back the same again.
They're going to get, and it perpetuates itself. How do you stop it? You give them a soft answer. You give them a soft answer. It turns away wrath. Yes, sir.
Proverbs 17:9 is also good. He who forgives an offense seeks love, but he who repeats a matter alienates a friend.
There's so much in Proverbs. A soft answer will turn up. Somebody's mad at you. They shouldn't be mad. They're wrong in their anger towards you. So what do? Why are you mad? I'm mad that you're mad. That ever happened? In other words, when you're mad that somebody else is mad, you don't believe their anger is right. You think they're wrong in their anger. So how do you address it? Well, you get mad because they're mad. Rather than thinking, well, why are they mad? I think they're wrong in their anger, but a harsh word's going to stir them up all the more. How can I give them a kind answer, kind response? That's what I call the delete the text practice. Listen, when somebody texts you and they're mad in the text, hey, write out what you want to say. Say it all if you want to, and then just delete it before you hit send. And then give them a soft answer. How many texts have you deleted? I pray that you delete many if you're led by the Spirit, because so often we react in the flesh. I'm like, no, I can't say that. That's not going to help. That's not going to help. And then you can just give a gentle, kind, soft answer. I tell you what, that principle, when employed, is a fantastic principle. Go to Proverbs chapter 12, verse 18. Let's look there. In the same principle. There is one whose rash words are like sword thrusts, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. There's a way to use your mouth that's like a sword thrust in the gut, you know? Can you just imagine what that might be? Yeah. The tongue of the wise brings healing. Soft answer will turn away wrath. Grievous words stir up strife. Another practical principle that you should employ as related to understanding. I don't know what number are we on? That was this is number 5. I'm doing them all in order on my paper. As you seek understanding, as you pursue understanding, check for understanding. This is a very, very helpful thing. Repeat back what you have heard. This is what I hear you saying. How often has someone said one thing? You hear them and process what they've said in one way, get mad and angry about it, then you argue against it, and the person says, that's not what I meant. Prime example. I was praying. Now, just think this through for a minute. I was at First Baptist. I was leading a prayer meeting for a time. And I would pray something like this: Lord, purge this church. A person across from me heard that to mean, God, get the crappy members out of here that need to go. That's what she heard. What I was praying is that God would deal with our sin. But she went and told others that I was praying that God would send out crappy members. Now, language is important. It is. How we use language and how it's to be understood and interpreted are extremely important. So sometimes, what could have happened, hey Jim, we were praying and I want to agree with you, but I heard you saying you wanted, I'm not for members being out of here. Is that what you meant? Oh no, here's what I meant. I know we all have sin, and I just want to be more righteous than I am. And I want God to purge the sin out of me like iron, like gold and silver is refined. That's what I was praying for. That's what I was asking God for. If she had taken the time, this is what I heard, and then got the answer from me, she could have, the next time she heard it, rather than the next time she didn't show up to the prayer meeting, and that's what happened. She could have enjoyed the unity rather than separate from the conflict, because she didn't understand what I was saying. Why do I say that? Because too often this happens in our relationships. We hear our husband or our wife say something. We think they mean one thing. They don't mean, they mean something else. And then we get mad, frustrated, and conflict ensues. If we'll simply, in a conversation, say, this is what you did, this is what you said, this is how I'm hearing it, is that right? Check for understanding. That's supremely important. Anybody relate to that? Have you ever been misunderstood and hated by another because you were misunderstood? It doesn't feel good at all. It doesn't feel good. So these are important principles for communication that we need to employ. Proverbs 10:19 brings us to number what? Does anybody write this down? 5. Number 6? 5 was check for understanding. Repeat back what you heard. Proverbs 10:19. I love this verse. It's a good one for me. This is why pastors, by the way, are in a very precarious situation, because they're usually the ones in front. They're usually the ones talking. How many pastors are sinful?
All of them.
All of them. How many church members are sinful?
All of them.
But whose sin is often in the spotlight of everybody? Pastors. Why? Verse 10:19, chapter 10:19. When words are many, transgression is not lacking. But whoever restrains his lips is prudent. In other words, the more you speak, the more sin there is. That's why it's good to be a person who's not so. And I think there's a proverb somewhere that says even the fool when he is silent appears to be wise. Something like that.
Better to be silent and thought a fool than to open your mouth and then be bawled out.
So Proverbs 10, the principle I said, don't speak too much and too often. Speak appropriate. Announce. You just want to reduce conflict, just stop talking. Listen. That's just a good principle, isn't it? Now, what we need to do for the rest of the message is deal with the motives of communication. We're dealing with the heart, and I probably should have started here, but this is where we're going to end instead. If I were a pastor sitting in my office a little longer and had more sermon prep time, I'd probably organize it a lot better than I have. But I'm organizing it on the spot right now. Sorry, but it is what it is. It just is what it is. You don't have to pay me this month if you want to. Number 7, spirit, tone, and motive of why you're communicating and what you're saying is as important as what you're saying, if not more. The spirit, tone, and motive. Spirit. What's the spirit behind it? Is there anger? Is there frustration? What's the spirit behind what you're saying? I love you! Dang it! Or, dang it, I love you. Hear the difference? Same words, different spirit. That's important to understand. That's why the scriptures teach us to speak the truth out. In love. In love. In other words, it's not necessarily so much what we say, but the spirit of what we're saying is what communicates more often than what is actually said. Tone. Very related to spirit. Spirit is more than demeanor. Tone is how your voice sounds. Get over here, Samuel. Get over here, Samuel. Hear the difference? Tone and spirit change the way a message is received. It really does. Tone and spirit. But motive. Motive is important. Why are you saying what you're saying? If all you're ever saying is what you're saying so that you can get what you want, that's going to be seen. In other words, when it's clear that what I'm saying is self-serving motive. Listen, who likes a self-serving person? You don't. You know why? Because you love to be served yourself. That's human. It's natural. If you have to put down that thought to serve other people, usually. True? But when someone is showing themselves to be self-serving, thou hypocrite, you don't like it. Why? Because you yourself are self-serving. I'm not being mean here. I'm just sharing the human heart transparently. This is just real. But man, how many times has someone been clearly you serving in the way they talk to you, what they say? You receive it well. It's received well when it's clear that your motives are for them. So that's what we need to deal with. Spirit, tone, and motive, then, are supremely important. And the rest of the scriptures or points kind of follow in with that, though I've got them as separate points. That was number 7, right? So number 8. Number 8. Your motive within communication, I'm going to pull 2 motives from James chapter 3 and Ephesians chapter 4. So let's go to James 3. See what we can see. This is a sermon you're gonna, if you're not taking notes, you probably ought. And I really thought to make a note page. Thought about it. But I know what happens to note pages. They get stuffed in a Bible, they last for several weeks or months, and then you have the Bible clean out day. When you clean out all the, well, we don't do bulletins here, but clean out all the bulletins and you just dump it away. That's who we are. Verse 13. Who is wise and understanding among you? I like King James there. Who is wise and endued with knowledge among you? Endued with knowledge. This is the guy who says, you need to listen to me. I'm right here. Who is that person? Who is the one who is wise and endued with knowledge? Okay. If that's true, by your good conduct, let him show his works in meekness of wisdom. In other words, your wisdom, how is wisdom usually expressed, by the way? Yes, actions, but mainly wisdom is expressed how? In words, generally. And this is a text that comes on the tail end of the tongue is a fire. Okay, it's about the tongue. So the context here is tongue. If you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your hearts, what's that? It's dealing with motive, isn't it? Dealing with motive. Bitter jealousy. The King James translation there is envy, and the other word is strife. You desire from another person strife, and you argue to get it. Selfish ambition. I think the word there for strife is electioneering. Think of someone who's electioneering. Hey, come on my side. Hey, no, not their side, my side. We're electioneering, getting people on over to me. I've got bitter envy and strife in my heart. I want to create sides here, and you need to be on my side. So he puts that over and against meekness of wisdom. Whatever meekness of wisdom is, and we're going to get there, that kind of a mentality is not it. He says, if you have bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, don't boast or lie against the truth. That is not the wisdom that's from above, but rather it's earthly, sensual, and devilish. That's from the pits of hell. That kind of wisdom that you think you have. Well, what is the wisdom that's from above? Well, verse 16, where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there will be disorder in every vile practice. No, the wisdom that's from above is first pure. That means unmixed. The motives are right and true. Pure, and here it is, peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere. That speaks to motives and tone and spirit. When you are engaging in conversation, bitter envy and strife, okay, this is, you need to be right, and the only way to be right is to come in on my side, okay? That's not, you might be right, but that's not the way wisdom works from above. That's the flesh. That's the way the flesh operates. No, if you're wise, wisdom that's from above is pure and peaceable. No one ever uses, if your wisdom is from above, you'll never use your wisdom that you have to create division, but rather you're seeking peace, and that's principle number 8. Your motives ought to be to seek peace. Look what he says. Verse 18 is the key. A harvest of righteousness is sown how? In peace. In other words, a harvest, think about this analogy. We're sowing in peace. So we're planting a seed of peace in the ground. And what's the harvest? What's the fruit that comes from when I plant peace? I get righteousness out of it. But when I'm planting selfish ambition and strife, what comes out of that? Every evil imaginable. That's what he says, kind of. There'll be disorder and every vile practice. All kinds of bad fruit comes from that kind of wisdom. So the kind of wisdom that we think we have when we communicate with another person, with our wife, our husband, or anybody really, it needs to be one so that we seek peace. There's sometimes I have to, for instance, to just give an illustration, there's sometimes I have to correct people working for me. I'll show them a job that maybe they've not done, or maybe they've done very little. So I will what's the word? I'll demonstrate for them. And I'll say, you got it? Got any questions? No. Good. And I go, and they'll start, and I'll go away and I'll start working, but I know that I need to go back and check. See how they're doing. And sometimes I will see something that I don't like and I need to correct it. Well, how many of you like to be corrected in the work that you're doing? It's the work I'm doing. I want to be corrected. What's wrong with my work? There's a problem, and I know that. And so I'll often preempt it with, I'm not trying to nail you here. This is really important. Let me just show you. Okay? In other words, I want them to know my motives. I'm seeking peace here. I don't want you to be offended by what I'm about to say. Okay? And that's an important grace, because usually when I'll do that, they appreciate the correction at that point. But sometimes when we feel like the motive is to be nailed, you did that wrong. You know, like some bosses like to do that when they do evaluations. They just enjoy nailing you. They're not trying to get the best out of you. They just want to nail you. I've got when I did my student teaching, I had a supervisor who she would come in and observe me once a week. And the first time we ever talked on the phone, I said some words that triggered her for some reason. I just said, I just want to be teachable. I was trying to be humble for this lady, so that, well, she jumped all over that. She says, I'm going to teach this guy. And every time we met, she only ever said anything negative to me. And you know what that did to my confidence level over time? So this is during student teaching. I'm student teaching. She nailed it. And I just felt like after the 4th or 5th visit with her, I was done. I felt like all she was trying to do was nail me. She wasn't trying to help me. I called for the supervisors of the university, and I said, this isn't working out. This is the problem. I'm at wit's end. They got me a different supervisor. The man was about 35 to 40 years old at the time. He was a man. And his first observation with me was, Jim, you have no confidence. I said, I know. He said, don't worry, I see a lot of good stuff. What that did for me was, I saw that his motives were for me and for me to improve the best I could. I saw that in him. The other lady, all I ever saw was she wasn't trying to help me, she was trying to nail me. And I didn't want to hear what she had to say, and I couldn't hear it. He still corrected me and showed me things and gave me, but it was clear his motives were for me. And I guess that's what I'm trying to share is I received what I heard. He came at me with peace, not a sword thrust. And I improved, and I got better, and I got a B. And I was scared to do, because you don't get a B in student teaching, because if you do that, then you suck. You've done poor. And I was thankful for what happened after that. I was actually a good teacher, but I had to be left alone for a little while, and I had to be loved by some supervisors. And God gave me a principal, my first job, who just saw the good in everything, and just helped me in a lot of ways, coming to my own. And I was just so thankful for her. And I guess what I'm showing you is just how I experienced a person who knows how to peacefully correct, who knows how to come at a person with a motive of, I'm for you and I want to be with you and I want you to be the best you can be. When you are that kind of person, you will create a harvest of righteousness for that. But if you're argumentative and you're just seeking to nail the other person and to be right all the time, there'll be every vile practice coming from that. Your motive then must be peaceful, seeking peace, because righteousness is the harvest of those who make peace. I love James 3:17 and 18. Good verses to memorize. There's another motive we need to be seeing as we think about motives and why we're communicating what we're communicating. It's found in Ephesians chapter 4. Ephesians 4. Now I'm taking this verse a little bit out of context, but it's okay, because I'm using it within a scope of flexibility in the Scriptures. Verse 15. The principle is taught here that speaking the truth in love, that's the manner in which we do it. We are to grow up in every way into Him who is the head, into Christ. The manner in which we speak the truth is to the purpose of bringing a person up into the head, into Christ, who is the head. In other words, my motives then ought to be for your growing up into Christ. My desire, when I see a flaw in you, isn't to nail you and just to change you for change's sake because I don't like your behavior, but rather my desire ought to be, I want you to be as Christ-like as you can be. And my motive then is to bring you as close to that as possible. And the manner by which we do that then is to speak the truth. How? In love. In love. So I need to have an aim, a heart, a motive that is seeking peace and reconciliation and seeking the aim of growth into Christ, edification, strengthening. Too often in our communication, our aim is to humble them, to belittle them, to bring them down to a level where they'll be humble like we think they ought to be. But God calls us not to humble people, but to build them up. In our arguments, sometimes to win, we resort to name calling. I'm not a fan of Donald Trump's name calling. I'm not a fan of it at all. It's childish. And sometimes, though, we enter into that childish behavior by nailing people with truth. Nailing them. It may be true, but the truth isn't designed to be nailed. Rather, it's designed to be built up. That's when we use the truth to build up, not to destroy. Be careful about your motives in conversation. I can remember times, and I think I've already shared this, and it's embarrassing, but I'm going to share it. I can remember times of arguing with my wife in an angry tone, quoting scriptures at her. I've done that. What am I doing? I'm taking the Bible, showing her her flaws, and nailing her with scripture. As if I myself was being godly, and I had plenty of scriptures to show that what I was doing with the scriptures was indeed ungodly. Let us not be that. I find the most practical text on reconciliation, biblical communication, is found in 2 Timothy chapter 2, and we'll end here. Verse 24 through 26. Not an unfamiliar text to many of you who've been around too long. The Lord's servant must not be what? Say it loud. Quarrelsome. A person filled with quarreling. Quarrelsome communication does no good. The Lord's servant should be kind to most people. Everyone. Notice what he says. Able to teach, patiently enduring evil. Correcting your opponent with harsh zeal. No, with what? Gentleness. But notice that, so the context here is I have someone, an opponent, a disagreeer, one who doesn't think like I think. We can often react in harsh ways, argue and fight, and say you're wrong, and get mad at them and walk away, and that'll never change anybody's mind. Or I can put on kindness, not quarrelsomeness, new word, and commit. Here it is, commit to teaching. We started with seeking understanding. As we have listened long enough to understand the way a person thinks, then we need to commit to teaching them why the way they think is wrong. And you don't begin that conversation with, let me tell you why I think you're wrong. You begin that conversation with gentleness and you say, this is what I hear you say. Is this correct? Yes. Can I show you some scriptures that may speak to that? Sure. You ask for permission and then you open the Bible together side by side. Read that verse for me. And often the Holy Spirit, through those very words, will do the correcting. But you've got to be a teacher. If you've got a child that doesn't want to learn, there's no amount of punishment that is going to make them want to learn anymore. I recognize that very early, and I learned very quickly. A motivated student is a learning student. So my primary job as a teacher was to motivate my children. Because when they were motivated, then they'll want to learn, and it'll be easy to teach them.
Okay.
So, what's that?
I was going to say, if they're motivated, they'll learn in spite of what you do.
Sure. So what's the point? When someone is wrong, you know they're wrong. You've got to put on the teacher hat. Able to teach. Patiently correcting your opponents with gentleness. Enduring their evil. But they get mad, they fight, and they argue. Endure. Endure the suffering as a good soldier. Correcting your opponents with gentleness. And here it is. And God may perhaps. He might. He could. He might could. Grant them repentance. But notice, who's got to change the mind? God does. But notice the means by which He changes the mind. Speaking truth in love. Teaching with gentleness. Correcting your opponents with gentleness and kindness. A principle along this manner. If you want to know how to be gentle with someone, think of times in your life where someone has approached you, shared something in your life that needed to be changed or altered, pointed it out, and you received it with joy. How did they come about? Or, if you put yourself in the mind of the other person, just think through how you would like to be approached with such a problem. Well, I want to make sure I minimize embarrassment, because when you're wrong, isn't it hard, even though when you recognize you're wrong, isn't it hard to admit you're wrong, because it provides embarrassment? So that's why you talk to somebody alone and quietly. Why? To help them. You're going to correct them, but not you're going to preserve their pride, so to speak. And that doesn't mean we want them to be proud. It just means it allows them to save face at a certain level. That's important. Because some people just get mad because they're just saving face. Their spirit is not in a place of humility to be corrected openly. How else do you want? Sometimes it's better when you want to be corrected. You don't want to be only corrected always. Learn how to praise before you pray. Why? Because what you're showing them is, I'm not coming to you and saying your whole life is characterized by what I'm about to share. These are very good qualities, but here's one. If you read the letter to the Thessalonians, he spends the first 2 chapters praising them, and the second 2 chapters correcting them. Praise then pray. Or chapter and a half, and I can't remember how many chapters there are. I want to say it's 4, there might only be 3. Point is that I noticed that as I was reading 1 Thessalonians. I don't know if I say Timothy, but 1 Thessalonians. Paul praises them, and then he corrects them. I think that's a good model. I think another way is just to make sure that they feel loved when you're correcting in gentleness. They need to feel loved by you. Listen, if they don't feel loved, they're not going to receive the correction well. Because it's going to feel like the correction is coming from hatred. So your demeanor and all these other things are important.
There's a good proverb for that.
Okay.
The words of a whisperer are like delicious morsels that go down into the inner parts of the body. So, speaking the truth in love quietly.
And that could be taken badly too. The words of a whisperer, like delicious
But
morsels.
it doesn't talk about are you whispering for good or for bad.
That's
it
right.
says this is effective. This goes down in. This works. So now it's up to you to use it for good.
Sometimes I'll call Samuel from and say, Samuel, come here. And I hug him. He loves that. He loves that. Delicious morsel. Okay. That's it. You want me to run through all that I wrote down? Just read it. Out of order, here it is. A soft answer turns away wrath, but grievous words stir up strife. A fool answers a matter before he hears it. Listen for understanding so you know how to answer. Don't focus always on being right or wrong. Listen to what they're saying, even if you think they're wrong. Spirit, tone, and motive are very important in being heard. Reason with gentle teaching. Repeat back how you understand them. Don't speak too much or too often. Seek peace and aim at growing up into Christ. As I sat and meditated on times in my life when I've been most effective communicator, those are some of the principles I've employed. Can you add to that? What would you add to that? What has been helpful for you in your communication? Can you testify or give an illustration of how you've applied one of those principles and the fruit that came from it?
I think one principle that would specifically apply to like disagreements between believers or maybe like a rebuke from a believer is trusting Christ in them. You know, obviously they are still sinners, but trusting, like assuming positive intent kind of thing. So like a good example of that was I was having a conversation with a guy one time who was seeking to correct me based on a perception that he had, and just like, and this is still true actually, but I did not believe necessarily what he was saying, but I trusted that he wasn't just saying it out of
malicious.
Yeah, that he was saying it because he legitimately wanted to love me, and obviously still believe that. And so, just like in my head thinking, he's not just saying that. Like Christ in him wants me to be aware of this, or at least he thinks that is something that Christ wants me to be aware of. One or the other, regardless.
But it's that love that gives you the trust to do the checking for understanding. The checking for understanding to me was a real big part of what he said, because first off, the English language is horribly imprecise, and then we don't use it well. So misunderstandings abound, and quite often you hear what you think they mean. You know, my dad used to tell me, listen to what I mean, not what I say. You know.
And context usually makes that clear.
Yeah, but we jump to conclusions all the time about everybody. And yeah, sometimes we're right, but more often than we care to admit, we are 100% wrong. The people you love, and you're showing that love by checking, double checking, you know, and he brought up the issue of trust. That requires trust to those that you love, to do that, you know.
I think what you said about listening to hear and understand them, even if you think they might be wrong, that's really helpful. And just talking also about the perception of a they have. So if someone's perception is that you've wronged them, well, even if you haven't, you'll want to hear that, right? Because if your goal is to make them feel loved by you, then even if you don't think you've wronged them, they do.
Yeah.
So how can I change what I'm doing so they feel like I've loved them?
Usually we get mad that they haven't perceived our love.
Right, exactly. And so like if your goal is to love them, then you'll want to hear them that they feel unloved by you. Yeah, tell me, what have I done, and how can I do this differently? Tell me, I want to hear, even though, of course, I didn't try to wrong you. I mean, that wasn't my goal, obviously, because I care for you. I don't know, it's just...
No, that's right.
It just makes sense if you really want to love them, to hear them, even if you don't agree with what the wrong they're bringing to you or whatever.
That's where they are.
And sometimes that does require backing off, letting the situation cool down. I was thinking this was the beginning of strife is like letting out water so quick before the boil breaks out. Sometimes now isn't the time for no matter how much you need it.
Spoken is like apples of gold. You know what I'm talking about? That's a song. Look it up.
I believe it's a real thing. It sounded like something you just made up on.
No, look it up. Word fitly spoken. Ask Siri. I want to know the verse.
I mean, it's kind of like sometimes it's like, no, I'm going to minister to you right now, and that's how it comes across, like you're beating on it, you know, and that's sort of speaking the truth with love. Proverbs 25.
25:11.
Read it.
Hold on, let me think.
Word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in the setting of silver.
Yep.
I used to know that verse like word for
Like a
word.
gold ring or an ornament of gold is a wise reprover to a listening ear. So it's kind of good.
For me, one of the important points was the being willing to be wrong. At the beginning, right? Just a willingness to say I was wrong and to be wrong. And it's okay to be wrong. It's good to acknowledge wrong so you can turn from wrong. And for me, that was one of the important points. And a fool answers a matter before he hears it. That's another, for me, that's an important point.
That's what thinking before you speak and listening. My son's in-laws had a fish fry last night, and they were invited. They always have one every year, and they invite people from church and all over. Well, my grandson is 16 years old, and his mother told him he could invite some friends. And then he did. And it turned out that the friend that he invited was female. So his mother was very upset because he didn't tell her that it was a female that he invited. And he got a phone for Christmas, last Christmas, but he's actually got to use it as much because they really had their hand really heavy on him. And when she found out that he invited a female, she grounded him for another week from the phone because he didn't tell her that it was a female. So at first I wanted to say, this isn't right what you're doing to this kid. You're going to drive him. I wanted to go say all that. And now I think, okay, I know where she's coming from. It's hard for her to let him grow, and I want to talk to her about it in a way that's going to say, you both need to do it in love, and to say, okay, this is, I see this, I know what's wrong here, and I know how to fix it. So,
gentle teaching.
yeah. And that makes, it's not always even my grandson and his wife, I've got them so far away from me now because I go, you never come and see me, you won't call me, you know, and okay, why would anybody want to come and see somebody that's beating them down all the time about it?
It's like you kind of shoot yourself in the foot.
Yeah, oh, definitely, no more love in my heart.
All right. Good one today? I don't know. It's good for me. Practical. Pray. Father, may our speech and our actions be just full of good fruit, full of the gospel, full of graciousness, kindness, and teaching. Teach us, Lord, to be like you. Amen. All